In the dusty archives of history, where every scroll whispers tales of days long past, there are names that still evoke a shudder. Among them is Bianca Cappello, a Venetian woman whose life became an embodiment of audacity, passion, and a fateful destiny. Born into a noble, though not particularly influential Venetian family, Bianca seemed destined for a predictable marriage. But her young spirit knew no bounds. Her heart was captured by a humble Florentine clerk, Pietro Bonaventuri. Their secret romance, like a flash of lightning, shattered the silence of Venetian palazzi. Scandal was inevitable. And so, under the cover of night, escaping shame and family wrath, Bianca fled with her beloved, finding refuge in bustling Florence. This was only the first of many dramatic events that awaited her. Her life, which began with such a desperate step, already foreshadowed tumultuous times. But the true drama, which would change the fate of Tuscany, awaited her ahead, beyond the walls of the ducal palace. Bianca Cappello, in her new, modest, yet married life, could hardly have imagined that her desperate flight from Venice would lead her directly into the heart of the powerful Grand Duke of Tuscany. However, fate, as always, had a far more dramatic scenario in store. Within the opulent, yet at times suffocating walls of Palazzo Pitti, the gaze of Grand Duke Francesco de Medici first met hers. Francesco, a man somewhat detached from the world, immersed in alchemical experiments, astrological calculations, and the mysteries of the universe, carried a deep melancholy and detachment from worldly affairs. His soul, often reclusive and distant from court, found solace in the bright, witty Venetian woman. Bianca became for him not just a mistress, but a confidant, a muse, the only one who could dispel his dark thoughts and understand his aspirations, far removed from political intrigues. Their connection, which began in the strictest secrecy, soon ceased to be a mere dalliance. It transformed into a deep, all-consuming attachment that became the cornerstone of his existence. Bianca, from a secret passion, became the central figure of his personal universe, overshadowing all other affections and duties. Thus began a bond whose repercussions would shake not only Florence, but the entire European court, challenging centuries-old traditions. Yet, in the shadow of this forbidden passion that ignited between the Duke and the Venetian woman, stood Joanna of Austria, Francesco's legitimate wife, a princess of the House of Habsburg. Her presence was a constant reproach, a silent testament to the violation of all proprieties. The court, steeped in hypocrisy and gossip, could not ignore this scandal. Bianca was subjected to a barrage of condemnation, branded a sorceress, a temptress, a destroyer of families. The stern, melancholic Archduchess, sacrificed to a dynastic marriage, was the embodiment of dignity and sorrow. Her quiet suffering, her enduring sadness only intensified the contempt for the Venetian siren. Florence whispered, savoring every detail, every glance. Gossip spread like poisonous ivy, entwining Bianca's reputation. But despite all moral strictures, public condemnation, and even the pleas of his own court, Francesco did not abandon his beloved. His devotion to Bianca was stronger than any convention. It was a love that defied not only the morality of the era, but also political expediency itself, foreshadowing new upheavals. The death of Joanna of Austria, Francesco's legitimate wife, in April 1578 after another childbirth, was shrouded not only in grief, but also in ominous whispers. The fragile health of the Habsburg princess, exhausted by frequent pregnancies and melancholy, could not withstand it. But did the court not too hastily forget its mourning when, just a few months later, in June of the same year, Francesco announced his intention to marry Bianca? The circumstances of Joanna's demise, despite official versions, unleashed an avalanche of suspicion. Was there not someone's malevolent will clearing the way? European courts, accustomed to dynastic marriages, were shocked by such a swift decision. The former mistress, a Venetian fugitive, ascended to the throne of Grand Duchess, but the crown could not erase the stigma of scandal. She received the title but not universal acceptance, remaining for many merely a sorceress and temptress. This long-awaited triumph of love was poisoned by the shadows of the past, foreshadowing new dramas at the very heart of power, where the rulers seemed to value personal attachments more than state affairs. Nevertheless, behind the splendor of the Grand Duchess's title, Francesco I himself loomed like a shadow. He was the ruler of Tuscany, but his true kingdom lay not in the political arena, but in the depths of his own mind. Fascinated by the mysteries of the universe, Francesco immersed himself in alchemy, astronomy, and the natural sciences. His court more closely resembled a giant laboratory, where he personally participated in experiments, attempting to unravel the secrets of matter and spirit. He built observatories, collected unique minerals and curious mechanisms, and patronized the boldest artists and scientists. However, this passion for knowledge alienated him from pressing state affairs, causing murmurs among the nobility and the populace. He was a sovereign whose heart belonged not to the throne, but to silent books and glimmering retorts. The Renaissance, so vibrant and turbulent, found in him a paradoxical leader, a duke whose soul soared above the earthly, yet whose decisions affected the destinies of thousands. And in this peculiar dynamic, Bianca, a woman of flesh and blood, tried to find her place. And so, Bianca Cappello finally ascended to the throne of Grand Duchess of Tuscany. But for her, the crown was not merely a symbol of status. Her ambitions extended far beyond the palace walls. Possessing a sharp mind and Venetian shrewdness, Bianca immediately set about filling the gaping void in the melancholic Francesco's character, his detachment from state affairs. She gracefully led conversations. Her refined taste transformed the palace halls, and her influence spread to the highest spheres. Bianca tirelessly promoted her Venetian relatives, seeking to strengthen their position, and thus her own. She attempted to become not just a wife, but a true co-ruler. However, despite her brilliant title and power, she could never overcome the invisible walls of prejudice. For many Florentine aristocrats, descendants of ancient lineages, Bianca forever remained an outsider, a Venetian courtesan. A woman who so craved absolute power encountered significant resistance. And while Bianca fought for recognition, another, far more powerful shadow was already gathering over the ducal court. But if Grand Duke Francesco immersed himself in a world of alchemical dreams, his younger brother, Cardinal Ferdinando de Medici, was the embodiment of a different, far more earthly and dangerous force. Pragmatic, perceptive, and immensely ambitious, Ferdinando viewed the world not through the prism of philosophical treatises, but through the lens of power, influence, and above all, dynastic interests. In Bianca Cappello, this Venetian courtesan, as he did not hesitate to call her, he saw not merely a foreigner or an object of fraternal affection, but a direct, undisguised threat. A threat to the reputation of the powerful house of Medici, to their standing among European monarchies, and most importantly, to his own future. Their confrontation was hidden, yet no less fierce. Every step taken by the Duchess, every effort to strengthen her status at court, met with unspoken but powerful resistance from the Cardinal. His cold, calculating gaze always pursued her, like an ominous shadow hanging over the ducal couple, foreshadowing new, far deeper anxieties related to the very foundation of their power. But what good is all power, all wealth, if there is no one to continue the great lineage? For Francesco and Bianca, despite their passionate attachment, this truth became a curse, a shadow that clouded every happy moment. The Medici dynasty, only recently elevated to ducal dignity, needed a strong foundation, a legitimate male heir. This was not just a matter of personal happiness, but a geopolitical necessity. The court grumbled. European monarchs, the Pope, all watched Florence keenly, awaiting the appearance of a legitimate heir who could strengthen Tuscany's position. The absence of a son threatened not only the future of the ducal couple, but also the very stability of Medici rule, their hard-won title. The burden of the crown seemed to multiply 100-fold when the very continuation of the lineage hung in the balance. And in this desperate search for a solution, Bianca was willing to go to any length, even to what seemed unthinkable. The lack of a male heir tormented Bianca, as it did the entire court. Her position, her power, her future, everything hung by a thread. Desperation pushed her to the brink, to the most audacious deception, faking a pregnancy. With maniacal meticulousness, she staged every stage, from the first hints to a growing belly. Astrologers, healers, even priests, all were called upon to confirm the joyful news, or were simply deceived by her desperate act. Francesco, blinded by hope for a long-awaited son, enthusiastically embraced this lie, while the court, though wary, was forced to rejoice. This desperate step, intended to save her from ruin, was merely the beginning of the end. The lie, built on fear and total despair, was too fragile to withstand a scrutinizing gaze. And that gaze was already approaching, ready to tear apart the thin veil of pretense. But her most elaborate intrigue, according to Stendhal, ended in complete ruin for Bianca at the most dramatic moment. As Florence held its breath awaiting the heir, Cardinal Ferdinando, like a predator biding his time, struck. Driven not only by ambition, but also by deep contempt for the Venetian woman, he had no doubt about the deception. On the very night Bianca was supposed to give birth, Ferdinando burst into her chambers and caught a confessor attempting to smuggle an infant under his cassock. The cardinal's composure was terrifying. He himself took the child in his arms, and stepping out to the assembled crowd, announced the birth of the heir. It was a triumph for Ferdinando, and a crushing humiliation for the Grand Duchess, whose desperate gamble was exposed before the entire court. The bitter seed of humiliation fell on ground ripe for explosion. Furious anger, a rage bordering on madness, flooded her mind, displacing everything but one thing: the thirst for revenge. Cardinal Ferdinando, that serpent who dared to expose her to public ridicule, had to pay. But how? How could she reclaim her lost dignity without alienating Francesco, whose love, though clouded, remained her only support? Bianca's thoughts raced, seeking an escape, a loophole in the labyrinth of court rules. Her once naive heart, broken by pain and betrayal, hardened, transforming into a cold, calculating mechanism. From a humiliated victim, she was reborn as a cold-blooded strategist whose hatred for Ferdinando became her driving force. The seeds of this hatred, sown in a disappointed heart, took deep root, sprouting into ominous plans that would inevitably pit two wills against each other in a deadly struggle. The humiliation Bianca experienced after the exposure of her feigned pregnancy only fueled her pride. The ambitious Venetian, whose love for Francesco was intertwined with a thirst for power, was now ready for desperate acts to maintain her position. She became a predator, clinging to a slipping crown, capable of anything to exact revenge and hold on to the Duke. On the other side of this silent confrontation stood Ferdinando. The calculating cardinal, driven by a cynical hunger for power, saw Bianca as a threat to the dynasty and his own ambitions. He was willing to step over anyone, mercilessly eliminating obstacles to the Medici throne. It was a clash of two powerful personalities, each believing themselves right and the other a mortal enemy. This battle of wits and wills, foreshadowing an inevitable tragedy, was gaining momentum, and it was against the backdrop of this escalating tension, on the eve of the fatal denouement, that fate brought them together at one of Tuscany's most picturesque villas. Villa Poggio, a Caiano, a Medici jewel, rose above the Tuscan hills, bathed in the golden light of the autumn sun. Its elegant loggias, lush gardens, and frescoes, whispering tales of love and triumph, seemed to serve as an ideal backdrop for reconciliation. Here, amidst theatrical stages where comedies were performed and secret alleys that bore witness to clandestine meetings, reigned an atmosphere of sensual luxury. The palace halls filled with laughter, music, and the scent of flowers, creating an illusion of serenity. It was a place where life was savored in all its manifestations, where every corner breathed eros and celebration. But behind this brilliant facade lay deep, unresolved contradictions, shadows of the past ready to engulf the idyllic scene. This abode of joy and pleasure would soon become a silent witness, and a tomb for Florence's most powerful figures, a deceptive calm before the storm. And so, at Villa Poggio, a Caiano, where the harbingers of a swift denouement converged, a figure appeared, capable of changing the course of history. Cardinal Ferdinando de Medici, whose name had already become synonymous with an unyielding will, stepped onto the threshold of the ducal residence. His meeting with Francesco and Bianca seemed to mark a long-awaited, carefully orchestrated truce. It was not a spontaneous reunion, but a masterfully staged performance. Bianca, whose heart burned with a thirst for revenge for her public humiliation, now displayed astonishing cordiality. Skilled in intrigue, she made every effort to please the esteemed guest, artfully feigning friendliness, concealing her deep hatred behind a mask of harmony. Every gesture, every word was part of a meticulously planned scheme designed to lull her opponent's vigilance. The villa transformed into a stage for show. A theater of hypocrisy, where the apparent peace was merely a facade behind which deadly intentions were already brewing. The lavish feasts and merriment that followed were but a prelude. Villa Poggio, a Caiano, usually an oasis of calm, was filled with feverish merriment. Days and nights merged into an endless succession of feasts and entertainments, where candles burned down like fading torches, and wine flowed freely. Behind every laugh, every dance, something else seemed to lurk, an elusive premonition, as if the air grew heavy around the ducal couple. Tales were told of strange dreams, of ominous signs that appeared to Bianca and Francesco, but they were dismissed as idle superstitions. No one could have known that this seemingly triumphant celebration of life, this apogee of luxury, was in fact a farewell ball. The festivities, intended to cement bonds and dispel suspicions, turned into the prelude to an eerie silence that was about to engulf these walls, the echoes of the last. Laughter still hung in the air when the shadow already loomed over them. At Villa Poggio a Caiano, amidst the lavish feasts, an evening arrived that was destined to be the last for one of the guests. Bianca's gaze, filled with icy resolve, settled on the pristine white blancmange, an exquisite delicacy she knew Cardinal Ferdinando particularly cherished. This dessert was intended to be his last pleasure. With a tremor in her voice, hidden beneath a mask of graciousness, the Grand Duchess gave an order that condemned someone to death. Poison, slow and agonizing, was added to the delicate dish, carefully concealed amidst the sweetness of almonds and milk. There was no room for doubt in her calculation, only a burning hatred forged from public humiliation. She saw only one goal, to eliminate the one who dared to break her will and shatter her dreams of power. But fate, as always, proved more cunning than the most elaborate plans. The dish, so meticulously prepared for one, became fatal. For two, an unknown force, or perhaps merely a twist of circumstance, compelled Francesco to partake in the meal of death. The poison, served under the guise of an innocent delicacy, now threatened both. But death does not come unnoticed, and not all victims are so blind as to miss its approach. At Villa Poggio, a Caiano, where a facade of reconciliation concealed deadly hatred, the air was electrified with a premonition of disaster. Cardinal Ferdinando, accustomed to shadows and whispers of conspiracies, knew. He knew that this evening could be his last. His spy network, his loyal eyes and ears, spread throughout the court, could not fail him. Perhaps it was one of the servants whose conscience proved stronger than fear, or a cold-blooded agent embedded in the very heart of Bianca's intrigues. When the exquisite blancmange, seemingly intended for him alone, was served, the cardinal's gaze remained impenetrable. Bianca, with feigned concern, insisted, assuring him of the dessert's safety and freshness. But Ferdinando, a master of courtly games, merely inclined his head slightly, refusing the dish with polite but unyielding firmness. He uttered not a word that might betray his knowledge, nor did he betray any alarm with a single gesture. It was a game of survival, and he had already made his move. His shrewdness and composure became his shield, allowing him to escape the trap that awaited him in the sweet treat. He survived, but the deadly drama was only just beginning to unfold. The poison had been slipped into the blancmange, the cardinal's favorite treat. But fate, or ill fortune, intervened in this deadly scheme. When the servants presented the dessert, Francesco, with the carefree nature of one more absorbed in science than intrigue, turned to his brother. "Ferdinando, try this wonderful blancmange. It's prepared to your taste, isn't it?" His words sounded like a death sentence. Bianca, frozen in horror, watched as her husband, with a gentle smile, reached for the dish intended for his murder. Her hand disobeyed her, her voice caught in her throat. How could she stop him without revealing the monstrous truth? She was paralyzed, caught in the trap of her own crime. It was the moment when an innocent desire to taste a dessert turned into a fatal mistake. The irony of fate was that in plotting another's death, Bianca unwittingly condemned her own love. Horror distorted Bianca's face. She watched Francesco consume the poison meant for his brother and understood. It was over. Her world was crumbling. Life without Francesco, defenseless and disgraced, was unthinkable. In her soul, a wild mixture of despair and boundless love flared up. What awaited her now? Shame, exposure, Ferdinando's wrath. Who would not leave her alive? No. If he was leaving, she would follow. Her gaze slid across the table, stopping on the ill-fated dish. Slowly, with an almost ritualistic determination, she took a spoon. A final gesture filled with sacrificial love and doom. She filled her plate, knowing it was her last meal. At the edge of the abyss, Bianca Cappello made her tragic choice, deciding to share her beloved's fate. But the agony was only just beginning. The night at Villa Poggio, a Caiano deepened, bringing not peace but a premonition of doom. As soon as the poison began its dreadful journey through their veins, Francesco de' Medici clutched his heart. A sharp pain pierced him, making him gasp. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and his gaze, so recently filled with anxiety, now clouded with unbearable agony. Tremors shook his body, his limbs convulsed, and soon the Grand Duke collapsed, losing consciousness, his face contorted in a grimace of agony. Bianca, having drunk from the same cup, felt an infernal fire ignite within her. Her once proud posture slumped, her breathing became ragged, and her elegant features were distorted by spasms. Servants frantically carried her to her chambers, where she thrashed in a fever, her mind sinking into a whirlpool of delirium. Death, so sudden and cruel, overtook them both, ending their lives so swiftly, as if an invisible reaper had cut down 2 flowers with a single swing of his scythe. Florence did not yet know what nightmare had unfolded away from its walls, but the city would soon shudder at the news that gave rise to the wildest rumors. Florence shuddered. The news of the sudden death of Grand Duke Francesco I and his wife Bianca Cappello struck the city like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. The streets, bustling with life just yesterday, fell into a stunned silence. Grief mingled with disbelief, and then, with the corrosive poison of suspicion. How could rulers, so recently full of vigor, depart so abruptly? Whispers of an unnatural demise, of secret conspiracies and ancient curses, instantly spread through palazzi and slums, outpacing any official statements. Every glance, every word carried a hidden meaning. The city, as if gripped by fever, became a breeding ground for the most horrific rumors. Panic grew, fueled by fear of the unknown. The death of the rulers became not merely a tragedy, but a catalyst for public unrest, tearing away the veils from deeply hidden intrigues. The true cause of their passing remained a grim mystery, but suspicions already hung in the air, pointing to invisible forces pulling the strings of destiny. Death, shrouded in mystery, instantly sparked a wave of speculation, shaking Florence to its core. Who was behind this fatal end, this sudden departure of the Grand Duke and his wife? Whispers of countless conspiracies circulated in the palace, and suspicions, like poisonous ivy, entwined everyone who had the slightest interest. Had Cardinal Ferdinando, the deceased duke's younger brother, the very one who so craved power, and had been publicly humiliated by Bianca, finally exacted his revenge by eliminating both? His motives were obvious: a throne freed from an unloved sister-in-law, and a brother more engrossed in science than governance. Or did Bianca herself, cornered and desperate, resort to the unthinkable, dragging her husband with her to the grave? Her hatred for Ferdinando was so deep that it could distort any logic. Or perhaps it was the hand of a foreign power, seeking to weaken the Medici, to sow chaos in the heart of Tuscany. Many versions, each more intricate than the last, circulated, but none were definitively proven. The web of intrigues entangled the truth, making it almost indiscernible. However, amidst this storm of suspicion, there was another, more mundane possibility, capable of changing all perceptions of the tragedy. But what if, behind this drama that unfolded at Villa Poggio a Caiano, there lay not the cunning hand of a murderer, but something far more ordinary and no less merciless? In an era when medicine was just beginning its journey and diseases decimated entire cities, the sudden death of 2 crowned heads might not have been the result of malicious intent, but merely a tragic twist of fate. The symptoms described by court physicians, high fever, chills, rapid deterioration, coincide remarkably with the manifestations of malaria, the scourge of the Tuscan marshes. This Roman fever was endemic to the region, claiming victims among commoners and royalty alike. Modern researchers, analyzing historical evidence, do not rule out that it was this insidious disease, rather than poison, that ended the lives of Francesco and Bianca. Perhaps in their last days there was no mystery other than the harsh reality of 16th-century medicine. Science offers this alternative, challenging centuries-old myths, but without providing a definitive answer. And yet sometimes, the truth lies deeper than it appears. What truly claimed the lives of the Grand Duke and his Venetian wife? The answers seemed buried with them in the earth. But centuries later, as science acquired new, relentless tools, the tombs of Francesco and Bianca were opened. The first, older autopsy reports, compiled in haste and at times evasively, spoke of fever and sudden illness, leaving room for speculation. However, modern investigations, conducted in the 21st century, yielded shocking results. Traces of arsenic were found in the bone remains of both spouses. Was this irrefutable proof of insidious poisoning? Alas, as often happens with the mysteries of the past, science, while granting us new, astonishing facts, does not always provide definitive answers. The presence of poison could have been a result of medical procedures of the time or even post-mortem exposure. These silent testimonies from the grave, instead of providing closure, only added more questions to the existing legends. And while scholars debate the causes of this fatal double death, the wheel of history did not stop for a moment. As soon as the death rattles ceased at Villa Poggio, a Caiano, Tuscany held its breath. The death of the ducal couple, shrouded in ominous mystery, instantly cleared the path to the throne. And along this path, without delay, stepped the one who had observed, waited, and perhaps woven his own intrigues for years. Cardinal Ferdinando de Medici, a man of prudence and ambition, the one who had narrowly escaped the deadly treat, took his brother's place. He acted swiftly and decisively, seeking not only to stabilize the duchy, but also to erase from memory everything that reminded him of the detested Bianca Cappello. Under his rule, Florence regained order, far removed from alchemical vigils and marital dramas. The man for whom the poison was intended ultimately received the crown. Thus, pragmatism and calculation triumphed over destructive passion, but true oblivion proved a far more complex task. No sooner had the last death throes at Poggio, a Caiano, subsided, than a new, somber shadow loomed over Florence. It was Ferdinando, who had assumed the mantle of Grand Duke. His first act was not to mourn his brother, but to launch a ruthless campaign to obliterate the memory of Bianca Cappello. The new regime, obsessed with erasing her from the annals, began a merciless purge. Her beautiful, haughty features, captured on canvases, were ruthlessly scraped off, or hidden in the furthest corners of palace storerooms. Any mention of her in official documents was meticulously expunged, as if she had never existed. Even her final resting place was denied next to the ducal couple. Her body, stripped of all honors, was cast into an unmarked grave, far from the Medici family crypt. The goal was clear: to strike Bianca from Medici history, to consign her to oblivion. But what is oblivion to a true legend? The harder Ferdinando tried to erase her from history, the brighter the flame of the myth of the Venetian adventuress, who dared to defy fate, burned. His desperate attempts only immortalized her name in the whispers of the people and in secret chronicles. The failed attempt to forget only strengthened her legend. She was not merely an outsider, but a catalyst of events whose shadow extended far beyond the Florentine court. In the annals of Renaissance history, amidst the golden splendor and bloody shadows of courtly secrets, the name Bianca Cappello shines particularly brightly, like a star whose glimmer still captivates minds. This Venetian woman, whose destiny intertwined with the house of Medici, was more than just a favorite or a duchess. She became the epicenter around which whirlwinds of intrigue spun, keeping not only Florence but also the most powerful courts of Europe in suspense. Her audacious escape from Venice, her boundless influence over Grand Duke Francesco, her pursuit of power, and her protection of her Venetian roots, all made her a figure not just regional, but truly international. Bianca Cappello embodied the very essence of her era, its ambition, its passions, its readiness to defy conventions. She was not merely a lover, but a charismatic, calculating, and dangerous woman whose mysterious life and even more mysterious death continued to intrigue entire nations, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Even after her departure from this world, her image continued to live on, transforming and taking on new forms. Amidst the court intrigues and whispers of conspiracies that enveloped Florence, Bianca Cappello's image did not simply fade but was reborn in the flame of art. Her story, full of passion, ambition, and tragedy, became an inexhaustible source of inspiration for artists, writers, and playwrights, forever enshrining her in the pantheon of great muses. Her piercing gaze, captured on canvases, her daring spirit, celebrated in poems, and the dramatic twists of her life, brought to life on theatrical stages. All these made Bianca Cappello a symbol of her era. From majestic portraits conveying her contradictory nature to stirring operatic arias and literary works, her image was interpreted countless times. She appeared as a fatal temptress, a victim of circumstances, or a brilliant schemer. This multifaceted nature only heightened her allure, transforming her into an eternal enigma, immortalized by brush, pen, and voice. But what was the truth behind this artistic prism? In the whirlwind of events that led to the tragic end at Villa Poggio, a Caiano, many researchers relied on vivid, yet sometimes debatable, testimonies. One of the most influential, though not always undisputed voices in this drama was Stendhal. His history of painting in Italy, imbued with passion and artistic sensibility, paints Bianca and Francesco in such vivid colors that it's hard to doubt their reality. Yet how strictly did this brilliant writer adhere to historical facts? Stendhal, more an artist of words than a meticulous archivist, often preferred drama over accuracy, relying on rumors and his own rich imagination. His versions, though captivating, often diverged from drier but corroborated documents of the era. He masterfully wove reality with fiction, creating narratives that captivated readers but did not always withstand rigorous analysis. Nevertheless, it is thanks to creators like Stendhal that ancient tragedies come alive, acquiring breath and pulse, even if their veracity remains only a part of a grand, but not always precise legend. The deaths of Francesco and Bianca at Villa Poggio, a Caiano, are but one of countless shadows cast upon the brilliant tapestry of the Italian Renaissance. This era, which gifted the world masterpieces of art and thought, was also an arena of ruthless games where poison served as a weapon no less potent than a blade. Recall the Borgias, whose banquets often ended in tragedy, or the Sforzas, whose enemies vanished without a trace. Poisons, skillfully mixed into wine or sweets, were accessible to anyone who craved power or revenge. Stories like theirs were commonplace in a brutal world where dynasties vied for supremacy. The demise of the Medici was no exception, but rather a confirmation of unwritten rules. This was a time when